Hello. So in this video, when I'm talking about the situation in Ukraine and how it's perceived around the world, with the Russian armed forces being widely accused of war crimes, such as deliberately bombing civilian areas, civilian residential buildings, when there are no enemy combatants in those buildings whatsoever. So that's most certainly a war crime. It's specifically prohibited by the Geneva Convention of 1949, which the Soviet Union helped draw up, which was written in Russian, English and French, all three languages being equally authoritative. Therefore, the Russians can have no excuse for claiming they didn't fully comprehend the Geneva Convention. Deliberately targeting civilians in other ways, cutting off water, electricity and gas to several cities, including Kiev, which means that the civilian population would die of thirst or else drink unsafe water and die from that very quickly. So there's been a very heavy and indiscriminate bombardment of Kiev and several other cities, but over a week into the invasion, and the Russian military has only seized one minor city, Kherson, in southern Ukraine. So the invasion is clearly far behind schedule, which is why they're running out of fuel and food and so on. They thought that Kiev would fall within 48 hours, but it's widely assumed that Kiev is going to fall within a week. There's only so long that they'll be able to hold out. The International Criminal Court has opened an investigation into Russia's action. Now, notably, Russia has not signed up to the convention, which would allow its troops to be tried by the International Criminal Court. Many other countries have. The United Kingdom has, Republic of Ireland has, the United States, China, a few others have not. So it's questionable whether Russian troops could ever be arraigned before the ICC. Russia virtually never punishes its own troops, even for the willful murder of civilians, even when that's proven absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt. But not suggesting that all Russian soldiers are bad. In many ways, they too are luckless victims of the Putin regime. They've been incessantly pumped full of propaganda. There have been some images of Russian soldiers in their vehicles surrounded by Ukrainian civilians who stand in front of the vehicles, who jump on the vehicles. Now, the Russian troops can get worried. They're going to be overpowered. The windows will be smashed, their guns will be taken off them, they can be killed. But in fairness to them, the Russian troops, they didn't run over the civilians, they didn't open fire or anything like that. But anyway, from the Russian high command, it's really been a strategy of just pulverizing cities and saying, well, we're going to starve civilians until you surrender, which so far has not really paid off. But anyway, I'm afraid to say that the Russian military has a dreadful reputation for crimes against civilians, including Russian citizens in Chechnya, that southern Muslim region of Russia, where there's a rebellion from 1994 to about 2004, where several thousand Chechen civilians were deliberately killed by the Russian military. And this is confirmed by the United Nations, by Amnesty International, by many courageous Russian human rights organizations who risked life and limb to tell the truth. Obviously, plenty of Russian journalists have been murdered by their own government for fearlessly telling the plain truth. So now in Russia, it's always been a crime to protest. If you protest first time offense, it's a $300 fine, which is more than a month's salary for most. It's a few days in jail for a second offense, and there are longer sentences for those who persist. You can lose your job for protesting even first time. So that's why there have not been many anti-war protests. About 7,000 people have been arrested for anti-war demonstrations. And the Russian media is only allowed to report on this conflict using official Russian sources. Using anything else is punishable by up to 15 years in prison. So Putin really is returning to Stalinism in that regard and calling his enemies Nazis. But as he's absolutely dehumanized them, it seems that really the gloves are off. For him, this is a fight with absolutely no holds barred. There is no legal limit, there's no ethical limit to what he won't do. Obviously, the Russian military has used chemical weapons many, many times in Syria, has deliberately murdered thousands of civilians in Syria. So the reason why chemical weapons are illegal is because they're undiscriminating. They kill everyone in the whole area, combatants and non-combatants. Other things, cluster munitions have been used in Ukraine, which were banned by an international convention in 2008. Although it's suspected that Ukraine has them as well. So the whole situation is not good as the conflict carries on. Putin may grow even more frustrated, may use more drastic measures. Russian military doctrine arouses the use of tactical nuclear weapons as a nuclear weapon not to destroy the whole country, but maybe to destroy a whole city. And if he doesn't achieve quick victory, he may resort to that. He's darkly put his nuclear weapons forces on high alert. So he's also signaling to the West that should you be too helpful to the Ukrainians, maybe you'll get a dose of the old nuclear weapons. And he said a few years ago that if Russia doesn't exist, the whole world may not exist. He's false accused of the United States of claiming that Siberia doesn't correctly belong to Russia. But conversely, some Russia ultranationalist politicians have said they should take back Alaska from the United States, which was held in 1867. They should take back Kazakhstan, and so on. So it's all very worrying, and what does it presage? The trouble is, Putin is surrounded by some people who are even worse than he is. Narishkin, Patrushev, Bortnikov, all men born in the 1950s who grew up in St. Petersburg, who are cut from the same cloth as him, with the same worldview, probably providing this echo chamber for him, simply reinforcing his delusions. And Putin said the other day that the majority of Ukrainians realize they're Russian, that the Ukrainians and Russians are one people. Is that why he's killing so many Ukrainians? Because they're Russian? Why are they fighting back so ferociously? They clearly don't believe they're Russian. He says only a few of them have been duped by extreme nationalist Nazi propaganda. So Putin claims anyone who doesn't agree with him is a Nazi, and as they're so utterly evil, well, there's no limit to what he can't do against them. So it's all deeply troubling. He really seems to have lost his marbles, but there's no one within his camarilla who's going to talk sense to him, who's going to restrain him. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, has been on the phone to him regularly, trying to calm him down, but he's not tranquil. There are also some rumours that Putin may be terminally ill. Is that why he sees this issue as something he has to resolve quickly? That explains his impatience. He spent 8 years trying to sanction-proof his economy. It's really not working. The Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank announced today that they shan't be lending any more money to Russia or Belarus because Russia's debt rating by Fitch has been reduced to junk. So they're going to find it very difficult to raise capital on international markets. They've been cut off from SWIFT and so on. Their debit cards, their credit cards won't work. There is a CIPS alternative payment system. There's talk about BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa can set up some sort of alternative payment system, but they're facing very real headaches, and this economic situation is only going to get worse and worse. Will people be paid on time? It might be back to the bad old days of the 90s when they're not paid on time. Inflation is bad, there's no doubt about it. It's over 10%, but it's not hyperinflation yet, though that could still come. So I think the Western strategy is to gradually squeeze him, not do anything too sudden and dramatic, which might make him reach for the nuclear button, but to gradually wear him down and maybe support partisan warfare by the Ukrainian resistance. I mean, Kiev is going to fall, it's a matter of time, but can that maybe be sufficiently costly for Russia in terms of gold and blood that Putin gradually concludes that it's not worth it, he's got to strike a deal? What's the off-ramp? Is there a face-saving way he can back down? To retreat now would just be too humiliating. Russians live in poverty because they spent so much on the military, but they can't even defeat Ukraine. So it really doesn't justify all this huge military spending, and really one of the reasons they live in poverty is because Putin and his cronies have been ripping off the public, have been stealing from them for decades. That's enough from me. Thank you here from London, UK. Goodbye.